Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the ClusterVisor Operator Group, also known as COG. My name is Wade, and I'm a member of the team here at Advanced Clustering Technologies. You've probably received a few emails from me about this event. I know I speak on behalf of our entire team when I say thank you for joining us today. This meeting is an important next step for us. Our mission regarding ClusterVisor from day one has always been to provide a tool that simplifies cluster management and solves your problems. We created this group to help ensure that we stay on track with that mission, and we'll do that by keeping your feedback at the core of this project so that we continue to solve the challenges and problems that are most important to you. Next slide, please. To that end, we'll be taking a few polls during this meeting so that you have a chance to share your thoughts and input. We'll also be raising a few questions to open discussions while we go through the material. Next slide. To ensure a smooth meeting today, all of the attendees are muted. You may use Zoom's raise hand feature to request that we unmute you if you have something you would like to say. You can also use Zoom's Q&A feature to send us questions and/or comments at any time during our time today, and we will be able to take those out and address them as needed. We are recording this meeting, and we'll share the link to the video recording in our YouTube channel and via email once it's available. With that, I would like to introduce you to our host today. We are joined by Kyle Shoemaker, who is President and CTO of Advanced Clustering Technologies, and Austin Ewens, who is a software developer here at Advanced Clustering. Next slide. And we will get started now with Kyle Shoemaker, who will start by going over today's agenda.
Thanks, Wade. I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank Wade for putting this on, as well as all of you for attending. This is the first time we've done an event like this, so we're looking for and eager to hear feedback. But this is the kind of agenda we've come up with. We'll be talking about some new features that have come out in recent releases, as well as what it takes to migrate to the 2.x release. Some upcoming features that we need some feedback on, and then again, we want to make this as an open forum as possible, so we'll have time for Q&A at the end. All right, we're starting with some recent new features. So this was released in 2.2601, so last month, but pretty towards the end of last month. And these are beta features, but what we found is that a lot of people, whether for personal preference or network reasons, weren't always able to access the web interface. And while you can do everything or most everything from the command line, it wasn't particularly easy. So especially editing, and you had to use the YAML interface to edit configuration. So what we've tried to do is build a command line TUI instead of a GUI, a text user interface, to replicate the features of the web editor for configuring things inside of ClusterVisor to make it a lot easier. So this is super helpful when it comes to discovery of what options are available, what the choices are, things like that. So you don't have to learn YAML, but if you like the YAML mode, still available. So I've got a quick demo, live demo of this. So before, when you ever ran the cvconf command, it would just give you the equivalent of this, the cvconf-help output. There was no default option for cvconf. So what's changed? Of course, live demo problems. There we go. So if you run cvconf now, you will get this text user interface, which gives you pretty much all of the configuration options that are available inside of ClusterVisor that are in the web UI, and all of the configuration and collections and sections like nodes and appliance and configuration and netboot, as you see here on the screen. So if you go into node and head, you can hit enter on that, and then you can edit it, and you'll get a UI that is as close to what we could make the web to be equivalent. So to equivalent to the web interface. So you'll see there's the same questions. If you go here to the tab, you'll see all these individual tabs. If I go over to the web interface and edit the head node, you'll see the tabs here all line up. So this is super convenient when you don't know exactly where a feature is or what the configuration parameter is in the YAML. Makes things so much easier. An example here is under status of active. It's currently set to active, but you can see the options. You can just hit enter on the one you want to change it to. You don't have to know the values to be typing into that field, etc. So I'm sorry. I've been a little sick. So the other thing is, like, if we go up here to networking and then under Ethernet, it's a lot easier to be configuring the network and the Ethernet in here than in the YAML interface. So for those that aren't familiar what it looks like when you don't have the TUI, if you do, this is what you had before. So if we want to look and see what the status was, you'll see here it is, and it's set to active. But to find out what the other options besides active were, you had to read through this valid properties wall of text and find status inside of here. And you can see that the choices are active, temporarily inactive, and permanently inactive. And while all the information was here and it's definitely doable in the YAML, we hope that the text user interface version of this will just make things a little easier for you. The other thing is that, so we did the cvconf-e here. Let's say you wanted to use the TUI, you can add mode TUI, and it will pull up the editor for that in the TUI. You can also make that your default if you prefer. So if you go to cvconf and under configuration global, you can go down to TUI and choose whether you want to use the YAML mode or the TUI mode is your default. So if we switch this to TUI and hit save and then submit our changes, so everything's saved, quit out of there. Now if we do cvconf-e node head, automatically pull up the TUI if we want. And if you wanted to use that most of the time, but occasionally use the YAML, you can still add the mode YAML now to get the old mode back. So it gives you kind of the best of both worlds. So this feature is still under beta. It is out, and like I said, in most versions of 2.0 that are probably installed on customer systems. We'd love feedback and suggestions and bugs, because again, it's beta. It's a new feature for us. We'd love some feedback on it. So the other thing is the boot sessions TUI. So right now, when you part of Provisioner, which we'll go into a lot more detail later, but there's this boot status because you can see where the nodes are in their boot process and watch them boot and everything. Before this release was a web-only feature, and there was not a good way to get this information otherwise. So adding the TUI version, if we do CV boot sessions, you'll see an equivalent UI here. And you'll see that it kind of matches here. So what I'm going to do is reboot node 2 here so we can watch how it actually works. Just a second. I'm doing this in a VM in another window. So, okay. So node 2 is starting its boot process now. And if we wait a few seconds here, we'll see this UI will update with node 2 starting to network boot and start the provisioning process. So we So you can see that it's now going through a boot session. This screen will update automatically every few seconds, but you can hit R at any point to reload it. So you can actually watch. And if you go back to the web interface, you see we're getting the same kind of messages. So you can go back and forth and see what you were not able to see in the web or in the text mode, which you can now see. We also offer a full history. So if you can hit H to see the history, and you'll see all the different boots, and you can search by node at the top here. You can search for different time periods. But if you go down here to like node 4, you can see here's a recent boot of node 4, and you can see all the details of that whole boot process, including the transfer of it and that kind of information. So that is kind of, I think, what I wanted to cover here on that recent new feature. So another new feature that we're adding that isn't in this release yet, but it's coming, is our one-click iKVM. So it's really a small quality of life enhancement, but we found that one of the most common reasons people ever need to get to the BMC web GUI on a node is to pull up the iKVM. And before you could do that through ClusterVisor, but you would have to log into the web interface and then navigate through the BMC's web UI and then click the right buttons and then be able to launch the iKVM. So what we've added is a quick one-click button to get there. This uses a Redfish API, which is an enhancement to IPMI, Redfish, or a replacement, a new API for server management. So the advantages here is you don't need to enter credentials in the web interface. You don't need to navigate through the BMC's web page. The disadvantage is that it is an OEM-specific API. So this will work on Supermicro systems and requires VNC still. We'll implement this for other systems depending on demand and whether or not they have the API. The Supermicro systems is one of the first that we've seen that had this, so that's why we implemented it. So if we want to see that in action, if we go up to nodes, I have it set up here for the head node. If we click here, you can see there's now a new option called the iKVM web page. You'll click here. In the background here, it's connecting to the Redfish, getting the right authentication information and URL to be able to pull up an interface. And then clicking the button, and you see we're immediately into the iKVM. So you'll have direct one-click access into that. Okay. I'm going to hand it over to Austin now, who's going to take over some of the next slides.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, so one of the biggest changes that we made in the 2.x release is the introduction of Provisioner. We created this using the feedback we got over the years on Cloner to improve how we handle provisioning nodes. For those that still want to use Cloner, it will still exist in the 2.x release, but will be deprecated with the plan to phase it out in the next major release. We designed Provisioner to no longer use grub in favor of a bootloader we can more easily control to mitigate against the issues we otherwise ran into seemingly after every single new minor release of Enterprise Linux. With us having control of the bootloader in ClusterVisor, this also means you can now blacklist kernel modules and modify kernel options used within ClusterVisor instead of having to figure out which of the many different grub tools you need to use to make those changes on your system. We also designed it with more security to ensure that all traffic end-to-end from the moment you boot to the moment you get to the OS is encrypted and that only nodes registered in ClusterVisor can make use of it. The disk layouts have also been completely redesigned to include an easy-to-use editor to take all the guesswork out of making adjustments to how disks are partitioned instead of trying to manage how it was before, which there's a bit of a pain point. We have also added monitoring tools in both the web interface and command line to allow you to see fairly close to real time what stage each node is in while it is provisioning. So you can more quickly know when everything is back up and running, which was what Kyle demoed earlier with the CV boot sessions. Should you, for whatever reason, need to access the node while it is reprovisioning, we also have a one-click attachment in the web interface along with the ability to do so in the TUI that allow you to connect directly into Provisioner while it's running on the node. For managing the image side of things, we noticed just about every single one of our customers adopted this pattern of naming like images with the same prefix, but then using the name field as a proxy of a description for what changed in that image. Although this had the drawbacks over time of making it a bit tricky to know which one of those similar images is actually the one you needed to use, unless if you put like a date feature in there. So it just gets a bit unwieldy after a while. So to simplify this, we added the concept of image branches, where all similar branches are organized under the same common image, and you can then promote any one of those to being the live branch that you want all the nodes to use, but it otherwise collects them all together so you can treat them sort of the way they're meant to be used there. Lastly, Provisioner is also able to compare at boot time what you have on the disk with what is in the image. So for minor changes to an image, it doesn't need to copy over the entire image. It can just do a delta update to make boots much faster whenever you're reprovisioning there, instead of waiting what can sometimes be several minutes of it copying over the whole image. Now it'll just do a delta update there. Next slide, please. The other most prominent addition in the 2.x release is what we are calling enhanced security. This adds additional security to ClusterVisor for secured environments that require more control over the security of their cluster. Included in enhanced security is full disk encryption for every node, compatibility with SE Linux, and FIPS mode. Using full disk encryption is as simple as checking a box in the provisioner disk layout, and supports unlocking the drive using TPMs on the device, encrypted across the network using Tang, using a predefined passcode stored in ClusterVisor, or just simply prompting at boot for a human to type in the passcode for each unlock. You can use whichever one of those makes the most sense for your situation. Managing SE Linux and FIPS mode will be done in the new Enhanced Security config plugin. For SE Linux, we have tested that ClusterVisor and all the services it manages will work with both the enabled and target modes in SE Linux, along with adding the policies and labels needed to have the cluster work unencumbered with SE Linux turned on. And for FIPS mode, we have modified ClusterVisor to work with only FIPS approved security algorithms available. The trickiest hurdle we ran into this for getting all this set up was securing iPXE to add in support for only FIPS supported encryption in there. And so otherwise at the time, there was nothing available that could do this via SSL traffic. To solve that, we paid the developers of iPXE to add support into that so we can make use of it in ClusterVisor to give end-to-end encryption from boot to OS even during the network booting process. Due to how much additional effort is needed to develop and maintain all this though, we have made Enhanced Security a paid add-on in the cluster licensing for those who need it. This will mean it will not be available out of the box for those who are simply upgrading from 1 to 2. But if you have any interest in this being a part of your cluster, you can reach out to your sales agent here with us and we can get you a quote for updating your ClusterVisor license to include the Enhanced Security add-on. Next slide, please. As a bit of an overview for what this will look like, it's not a whole lot that you need to configure on here, so it'd be very easy to make use of this. On the left, you have the config plugin for configuring SE Linux and FIPS mode, and on the right is the encryption settings for the disk layout. So at least on the configuration side of things in ClusterVisor, if you need to add in these features, there should be very little overhead for taking an existing cluster and adding the enhanced security functionality to it. Next slide here. Those were the standout features in 2.x. We want to briefly cover what it will look like for those that are still on 1.x and want to migrate to 2.x. For those of us who are with us in the early days of ClusterVisor during the 0.x release, you may recall it was a little bit involved migrating from 0.x to 1.x. Thankfully, going from 1.x to 2.x is much simpler, and we're encouraging everyone who is on 1.x to upgrade when you can to 2.x. This will not require any change to your ClusterVisor license or needing to immediately change anything in your cluster configuration before or after migration. We do have a tarball we provide in our repo site shown there for performing the migration that automates just about the entire process. But if you would like any assistance with migrating from 1 to 2, just reach out to us and we'd be happy to walk you through the process, which you can do by making a support ticket using that URL or through our client site. Next slide, please. While that is all that we have currently available in 2.x, we have some upcoming features that we have in the works that we would like to share with you and for some of them get your feedback on. Firstly, we are planning on pivoting away from using MongoDB as the backend database for the cluster configuration and instead move it over to SQLite. Many other features in ClusterVisor are already making use of SQLite as the storage backend, and MongoDB has remained a holdover from how we designed it on day one. This change will remove a reliance on a third-party dependence, make the project less complex, and make it easier to back up the cluster configuration since it'll just be a single file at that point rather than baked into another service. We'll also use this as an opportunity to improve the performance of the ClusterVisor server, since a lot of the bottleneck in getting more performance out of it is from keeping backwards compatibility from decisions we made very early on in the project. So from your side of things, you will probably not notice any change when this happens, aside from the performance boosts from the optimizations we can make while doing this change. So this is more or less just going to be a quality of life update for the server process on your side. Next slide. We'll also be adding additional enhancements to the auditing added to ClusterVisor in 2.x. While we didn't showcase it earlier, part of one of the things we changed in 2.x was adding auditing for any action in ClusterVisor that changes the state of the cluster. So when you provisioner images are changed, the cluster configuration is changed, commands are run across the nodes using cvexec, or files are copied across the cluster using cvcopy. Any of those changes that you would be making to the integrated users in the LDAP database, these will all generate audit logs that can be accessed either in the audit section of the web interface or using CV Audit. The one thing we're missing in this right now is changes made to the configuration. Right now, if you change anything in the cluster configuration, like say adding a hostname alias to a node, it would just simply log there was a change made by whichever user was logged in, but not specifically what was changed. We plan to include that as well in a future release after we complete the database redesign that I mentioned in the prior slide. This should make the task of reversing a configuration change more trivial, along with assisting in troubleshooting to see exactly what was changed in the cluster prior to any incidents that may have happened. And now I'll switch back over to Kyle, and he'll cover more of the upcoming features we have for ClusterVisor.
One of the things that we're looking at adding is EL10 support. So ClusterVisor currently supports EL8 and EL9. EL10 made some significant changes that require some workarounds from previous versions, especially when it comes to some of the interactive GUI features that CV can do regarding like VNC. If you haven't looked into EL10 yet, X11 is completely removed and everything is Wayland. They also removed all the VNC components and are now strongly suggesting RDP as your replacement. That adds a lot of complications. So Anyway, it's a feature we're working on. The good news is that our CI/CD pipeline is already building EL10 releases and has been for a while, and the RPMs are available. It's currently we would call beta though. So I guess one of our poll questions here, our first poll question is going to be, what is your plan for EL10? So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll now, and give everyone a couple minutes here to answer. So, okay. Okay. So, we'll let everyone know that the vast majority was the 1+ year answer, with the 6 months and 12 months. Actually, never was second place, and then 6 months to 12 months was third. So definitely doesn't sound like the EL10 support is an urgent feature from most of our customers. We had a few with as soon as possible, but the vast majority were not. So definitely good feedback for us and help us do a little more planning on how much effort we need to put into that. The next one is a much bigger feature and was always a plan from the beginning, was a user front end. Right now, ClusterVisor supports the web UI is mostly for administrators. It does support users logging in, but the question is, do we build a much more advanced web front end, and what would those features be? So the features under considerations here are a file manager, a terminal, a graphical job submission, being able to run interactive GUI jobs like VNC jobs on nodes, allowing users to manage their job queue, seeing reporting and utilization and queue times. So here's another poll that we want to launch. Okay. So the first one is multiple choice. So if there's any features there that are interesting to you, please mark them. We'll give a little more time on this one just because there's 2 questions. Okay, I'm going to shut down the voting in here a minute or two. Okay. Appreciate everybody's responses there. It's lots of different answers. So thank you. Now, are there any other user-facing front end or discussion? There's some questions about this that have been submitted, but if you want to ask something via audio, you're more than welcome to by raising your hand. The first question here was integration with Open On Demand. That was not necessarily our intent, but it is an interesting potential concept. So it might be something we'll look into a little more. Here's another one here of, given that Open On Demand already provides all this functionality. So we would agree that Open On Demand does provide most of this functionality and is good software. We have found that a lot of people have a lot of issues getting it set up, running, especially making new job configurations, things like that. So there are things and ways that we think could be done a little easier, but that's why we wanted to kind of ask these questions: is, are people happy with the way Open On Demand works and everything or not? So I got a question here of somebody that's asking to talk here. So Jason, you are unmuted. Feel free to
Hey Kyle,
discuss.
how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right, man. Sorry you're a little bit under the weather. Yeah, I mean, I would just say, you're right that on the one hand, Open On Demand can be a little bit of a bugger to get up and running. I would say that process has become substantially less of a barrier than it was in some of its earlier releases, and with the general embrace of it from the broader community, especially the national supercomputing community. I would think that if you're noticing issues with, how it integrates with Slurm or any of these other things like that, maybe better effort is spent working and contributing to that development effort than kind of trying to do it yourself. At least that's what I would put out there.
And that's why we're asking these questions, and I definitely appreciate the feedback. So, okay. Anybody else have anything they want to add there? I see here a comment about the most useful user phase is user to check CPU minimization of their jobs, lifesaver, and hard to do in other places. Yeah, that was one of the things that we were thinking of, and one of the long-term features, which we know how to do, it's the data storage aspect of, is to allow those metrics that we collect to be process specific. So right now we collect lots of metrics on the individual nodes or the jobs. I'm sorry, on the nodes, but we don't collect them on each process on the node. And that's something that we're definitely investigating and would love to extend and be able to kind of give a summary after job of this is what how efficient your job was. You requested this much RAM, you actually used this much. You wanted this many cores, but you were using this much allocation, that kind of thing. So that's definitely something that we would like to add. So looks like we have a question here from David. You're unmuted.
Yeah, so just to elaborate on what I commented, what you just said, and then my next one about being happy with Open On Demand on its own. Excuse me. I think from a user perspective, the only thing that I need is what I wrote there, so that thing. And the only nuisance that I see is that they might be using on demand already or maybe not. But let's assume that they are. And if they are, then they have their jobs there into the on-demand interface. And then now they have to manually track the ClusterVisor user interface, find the same job ID and so on. So I don't know if you want to do that, but that would be cool if you do. Maybe, it could be a very simple plugin that on-demand support that you just add a link there that will bring from on-demand straight to the page of that resource utilization in ClusterVisor. Now that still requires another login, which is still a nuisance for the users. And was discussed with Austin this, and that cannot be removed in other ways because of how that's done with Cockpit. But it still will be nice. Now, if you even want to make that available in some other ways that might be just a file on the file system owned by the user, that becomes a very easy plugin for on-demand to plot on its own. I think that would be superlative, but I don't know if that's worth your time to do that.
Yeah, I mean that's a good idea. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of like and for open on demand, and people are already using it. And I agree. I don't want to reinvent the wheel for reinventing the wheel's purpose. So, if there's a way that we can integrate it well together, I think that's an area that we hadn't put a lot of thought into, but obviously sounds like an area that is worth exploring. So, yeah.
And to kind of cover the point you're making, one of the bigger motivations of having it be in ClusterVisor is, like you said, if they have all the job submission done and open on demand, but then they want to track the things that ClusterVisor has for it, well, then you have to find the job ID and then pull the job ID up in ClusterVisor and do all that there. Versus if we hypothetically had all this done in ClusterVisor to where you could do the job submission there, then you're not jumping between two different points of software, and you can have all of it done together in one singular place. So that's kind of the thinking for this. Not necessarily that open on demand in of itself is doing anything poorly, but more if we wanted to add on to what it is doing, it just becomes a little bit more for users to keep track of if they're doing it in 2 points of software rather than just one. So that's kind of the thinking behind it.
Looks like we got one more here. Jason again.
Hey, Kyle. Yeah, shifting gears a little bit. I remember there was a point several months ago, and so this may have changed, and I'm not trying to commit him to what he said, but I was talking to Stackpole, and he said that at some point, if we did a full migration to two, which we are using two, but there was some, point at which if we embrace some of its feature set, that, for instance, we would have to rely on its interface, for instance, to manage like our Slurm configuration, which now we just do, locally on disk. It's easy. We just VI the file. It's there. We know the syntax. Everything's in one place. And my early experience when we first had CV installed, which was the 0 release, as well as going through the 1 release, managing Slurm through the menus and the various places and all that stuff was really cumbersome to me. So we actually have it turned off right now, and I'm not looking forward to having to go back to that model. So can you speak to sort of what's driving that decision, or has anything changed along those lines?
I think that was never a decision. So I think you might have gotten some misinformation or maybe even some miscommunication happened there. So our intent always from the beginning, ClusterVisor, is that any configuration changes that were made are made through a plugin, and so the plugins can always be disabled. So in the 2.x release, there is a new Slurm plugin system that better integrates with newer versions of Slurm. So and so you can update Slurm independently of ClusterVisor much easier as Slurm changes its API as frequently as it does. That you can stay on top of that. But if you like the way you do it, you turn off the Slurm plugins and you're good to go. So the only issue with that is if you want the integration of Slurm inside of CV, as far as getting some of the data and things like that, there will be a few things you would have to do manually, but it is still doable. So you can upgrade fully to 2.0 and not have to use our Slurm setup stuff. We built the Slurm setup stuff as a convenience for those people that aren't that familiar with Slurm and don't want to manage it themselves. But if you're happy with the way you're doing it, there's no reason you have to switch anything.
Yeah, in terms of what you're actually getting integrated when you have ClusterVisor doing that for you, yeah, it's writing the config file. It does also have in the web interface, there's a job scheduler page, which gives you kind of a GUI of a overhead of what jobs are running on there, similar to showing like the job queues and what's actively running, as well as collecting some stats that are in Slurm. If you don't care or don't need any of those, then there's no reason to integrate it with ClusterVisor. That's really the main thing that the integration is doing there, is just adding some quality of life things on there. But like I mentioned, you absolutely don't need to do that to use 2.x.
Oh, I think, thank you for that explanation. I think what you said jogged my memory in that it is that if we wanted to use ACT's kind of workflow to update Slurm, then we would have to do that via the plugin mechanism, which would then control the configuration and stuff like that. Because we've really enjoyed all of your expertise in that. That is not something that we have historically done on our own because of the complexities and rebuilding the MPI's libraries and all of that stuff. And so we have been able to do that in the absence of doing it through CV. But I think what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is that if we do want to take advantage of that moving forward, you're going to shift that into CV. And so we would therefore have to begin to use that plugin again if we want that ability. Is that more accurate?
Not necessarily, actually.
Yeah.
So while the plugin does make it easy to write the config file, you could just turn that plugin off and just write the config. It's in a new directory. It's etc CV Slurm, just so that if anyone has like another Slurm package, it's not conflicting there. But if you turn the plugin off, you can still write the file yourself there and not do that in ClusterVisor. It's a nicety you can add in. Part of the install in there will turn it on by default, but you can just turn the plugin off and not use it. So you can have both to where you're using the CV Slurm admin tool to do the upgrades for you, but then do all the actual management of the file on your own. If that makes sense.
Okay. I think we're going to move on. We still have a few more slides and we're rapidly running out of time here. So the next area that we wanted is some feedback on reporting. So this is a common request we've heard from people is they would like more reporting inside of CV. We get a requests for user and admin reports for Slurm. So for user reports, they could be efficiency of what was allocated versus what was used, details about the jobs run by overage or overtime ranges, admin reports about system-wide metrics, how many jobs were run, how many cores, how much memory, things like that. So if there's anything specific people want to see here on what reports you would like, we would love to have feedback here as well. So again, we'll open this up to anyone that feel free to ask a question via the chat or raise your hand, and we'd love that feedback. Bill, you're unmuted.
Hey, yeah, so cores and memory would be good. I didn't see GPUs mentioned. Would that be
Okay,
something you'd add as
sure.
well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's
Anything specific on GPUs? I mean, there's so many different metrics
right.
that are available. What
Uh,
would you be looking for there?
I would say maybe so. A lot of times I'll have users that'll spin up uh, a Jupyter notebook or something, right, and then just leave it idle. So I'm always checking for maybe power usage and then like memory usage,
Okay.
for sure.
So you
With
want to see if they're actually using the GPU for as long as they're requesting it, kind of a thing.
right, yep.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, great feedback. Thank you. Oop, I hit the wrong person there. Jason, it looks like you had
Yeah,
something. Oh, sorry about that, Jason.
oh,
I'm
yeah, no, sorry.
not an expert with Zoom here. So
By this time, you'd think we all would be, right? But
yeah, right.
no, I just want to plus one this because, there's a whole ecosystem of, sort of utilities that the Slurm community especially have written to try to get at this question of efficiency and to try to get that reporting to their users in an effective way. And I have tried many of them. Some of them work better than others, but it would be lovely to have a single consistent way to do that. And I will plus one the request for GPU usage. A lot of the utilities aren't able to capture GPU usage as effectively because of the way that Slurm has historically handled GPU reporting as a generic resource and not as a dedicated kind of, GPU understandable kind of metric. So yeah, this is exciting.
Yeah, I think we have the advantage of collecting not just Slurm data, but we're collecting all the node specific data. So integrating those GPU statistics we're already collecting with the data from when the job ran and things like that makes it a little easier for us to be able to generate some of these kind of reports. And that was kind of our thinking. But it is a very open-ended topic. So, and what reports are there and what reports people need and and how complex of a feature does this need to be and people want becomes what's kind of our question, and then whether or not it's important that the users can access these reports or if these are really more useful for admin only kind of thing. I see there's a couple of write-in questions here about wait and queue. That absolutely makes sense and would be an easy one to add. And then we've got another one about statistics about um, uh, as well as wait and so everything you wrote, as well as wait and queue, average min max variance. Okay, thank you, David. There's a question about with Slurm being part of NVIDIA, any plans to support other open source schedules? Love feedback on that. What other schedulers would people want to see? I don't think we're opposed to that at all. The way the scheduler interface in CV was created. It is a plugin architecture from the beginning because we've been through quite a few schedules over our 25-year existence. So we knew Slurm was the big hotness now, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be. But we have not had a lot of requests from people for other schedulers. So if anyone has other schedulers that they would like to see supported, please submit them. We would like to have that discussion. I see this question here. Some preset examples of dashboards. That is something that has come up multiple times, and yeah, we need to do that. And that is a failing on our part. So we will definitely make sure we do that. Any thoughts on here's another question. Any thoughts on Debian Ubuntu support? Yeah, we actually have a lot of the code there for it. We just haven't had a huge demand. So I would love to hear your feedback on which, if you're using Debian or if you're using Ubuntu, and which versions, and how many other people would like that. Well, there's another question here. Thanks, David, for the link to a particular schedule, the Flux scheduler. I've heard of it, but I haven't spent a lot of time with it. Question about ARM support. This is another one. In the 2.x release, we spent a lot of time putting in architecture-specific things. So before, there was an assumption everything was x86. So now everything is kind of planned around and built with architecture being an option. So that is something that is in the plannings. Again, we just don't have a lot of demand for ARM support, so it hasn't been a high priority.
Yeah, the biggest hurdle with the ARM support is less the software side of it, more just the logistics of how that would work in there. Because if you're building all of your jobs on a x86 system and then you want to run it on ARM, it's not going to work. So you almost need to have two separate head nodes in there if you're going to have a mixture of them, or just have the whole cluster be on ARM. And so anytime that has been brought up is usually where we don't get further progress on there. So it's more just figuring out what the cluster should even look like whenever you have multiple architectures in there to make it still seamless from a user perspective running jobs on it.
Yeah, it looks like we have Ron is allowed to talk now. I've allowed you to talk, Ron. If you don't have any question anymore, feel free to lower your hand. I do see you've written in a text question here about what are the preferred Linux distros, Oracle, Rocky. We find most people pick Rocky. The majority are Rocky. We've had a few people with Alma. I don't think we've had very many people or any people request Oracle, but in theory, in theory, there should be no major hurdles in making it work since it's just a rebuild of Red Hat. So, but it's not something that we see, again, any real demand for.
Yeah, in general, we try to design ClusterVisor to work with a RPM-based distro. There's a little bit of nuance whenever you have a difference between Red Hat and Rocky on there, but aside from the subscription manager on there, more or less all of them kind of work interchangeably within reason.
All right. Well, it sounds like reporting is an area that people want, so we'll spend some time thinking about what that looks like a little more and figuring out how we can move forward with that. So this is one that came up fairly recently. This is an admin-based VPN to the cluster. purely for system administrators, not for end users. And the idea is to get your laptop or desktop on the cluster network directly for maintenance, for ease of use of managing PDUs, IPMI, BMC, storage arrays, anything that's inside the cluster network. So we could build a WireGuard or OpenVPN type system directly into CV. You can go to a web page, hit a button, download the config file and a client, install it on your laptop, and click a button, and would be immediately on the cluster site network. Obviously, you can set this up and do this now if you'd like, but it's not always the easiest thing to do. Challenges would be, additional ports would be open on the CV appliance to do it, potential more scrutiny from IT and security teams, and you'd have to install the client on your workstation. So got a poll about this if there's any desire for this. I'll leave this one open a little longer since it's a 3-questioner.
For the point that Bora mentioned on WireGuard, while that is on the list there, it does have the slight issue that the kernel module for that is not in repo, so you would have to build that after each release.
Actually, that's only an 8 on Red Hat 8. So 9 and newer has it as a release candidate preview in Red Hat. So I did look into that a little bit a few days ago. So
okay, so that's still more of a candidate. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna close the poll in here about 15, 20 seconds. So if you haven't had a chance to vote and would like to, please do. Okay, it looks like it's about split on yes, no, but a lot of unsures. So it's something that we'll probably do a little more investigating in to see how feasible and what that would look like. So again, thanks for your response. I think now we're basically one more poll. And then we'll open up to general discussion. I know we're running a little longer than we thought we would. So if people need to cut out and don't, then certainly understand. But let me pull up this last poll about supercomputing. So supercomputing is in Chicago during the week before Thanksgiving. We'll be there exhibiting again. So we're considering putting an in-person event like this on. So we're wondering if there's any demand for that. So, okay, I'm gonna another 15 seconds or so and then close this one down. All right. Thanks for the response. It sounds like we've got a few yeses and some no's, quite a few no's and some maybes on whether they're attending or not. So, all right, now that was kind of all of our prepared content. So, opening it for discussion. If there's any other topics or anything that people would want, now is the time.
Yeah, if there's anything in ClusterVisor that you would want to see that we haven't mentioned in here, but you think really should be, just either put it in the Q&A or raise your hand. We can discuss it further here.
Well, it seems pretty quiet. So I think we might be done. We did have one more potential question here. So we've thought about doing more frequent versions of this, but not exactly sure what that should look like. One of the ideas that someone had is to have kind of an office hours. Didn't know if there was would be a interest in that, where we would just be available at a kind of a regular interval, where anybody could join and just ask questions or get help on something in CV. So have a quick little poll on that. If anybody would be interested in that, then it's something we could potentially do. I'll leave this open for another 20 seconds or so if you haven't had a chance to vote and would like to. All right. Thanks for your feedback there. It looks like we're 60-40 yes, no on that one. So we'll take that into advisement and consider it. If we do, we'll send out some emails on when those would be and see how that would go. But if there's no other questions, we'll end it right at 2 o'clock and give everybody the rest of their day back. And again, we really appreciate you attending. Hopefully this was useful for you as much as useful for us. It was very useful for us. The feedback is very, very helpful. So.
Yeah, and if at any point later you have anything else you would like to share with us, feel free to send a support ticket or email to us with any additional feedback you'd like, and we'll do our best to help you there.
Yep.
Yes, thank you to everybody for joining us today. And as I said at the beginning, once this recording is prepared, we will send you the link, and you're welcome to comment any more that you would like when we have that communication as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.